Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a Sunday, September 14th edition of Flashpoint. We have a great show for you on tap this morning. Take a look. A government shutdown is starting to look imminent in Michigan. So we're talking with House Minority Leader Democrat Ranjiv Puri and Republican State Representative Mark Tisdale about where things stand. Then, in the wake of the political assassination of Charlie Kirk, we're discussing the state of American political discourse with some familiar faces. Insiders Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson are here along with Local 4 legends Devin Scillian and Guy Gordon. So let's set the table here in regard to the state budget. In February, Governor Whitmer submitted her budget recommendation to the legislature. In May, the Democratic-led Senate passed its budget and sent it on to the House. Now, between then and July 1st, there was supposed to be a House budget passed, followed by negotiations, and then a budget they all agreed on and would send it to the governor's desk. None of that happened. The Republican-led House didn't pass its budget until 2 weeks ago, and negotiations just began last week. And they haven't gone well, with lots of name-calling on both sides. And now, Michiganders are left a little more than 2 weeks away from the start of the fiscal year and a government shutdown. No roads budget, no education budget, no state budget. This morning, we're going to get a sense of where lawmakers are in the whole process with two who are very close to it. Let's talk about it right now on Flashpoint. Joining me this morning, Democratic House Minority Leader Ranjiv Puri of Canton, and from Rochester, Republican Representative Mark Tisdale. Thanks so much for being here. I know it's a difficult time, but I know everybody, all eyes are on the budget. And Ranjiv, let me start with you. Last week I read you said, I don't think I'm very optimistic about a deal right now. I would assume that you can't be any more as another week has gone by and we're not there yet.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm not. You know, we have limited time left here, just a couple weeks. But I really think it's our speaker has been setting up a government shutdown all term. He's been hinting at it since January, February, and now we've blown past any statutory requirement in July, and so I think it's all kind of part of the plan.
Is that a fair criticism when you look at the speaker, who was invited to be here this morning, by the way, but couldn't do it? Doesn't want to meet with any leadership, only wants to deal with the governor?
Well, I'm not certain of that. I know Speaker Hall is in Lansing today, and of course they're working on this issue. But interesting what Ranjiv was saying. Yeah, I was asked about a government shutdown back in February, and of course it certainly wasn't my idea to come up with that subject. And in March we passed a kind of a fail-safe, break the glass, emergency use partial budget. So that's passed the House. If the Senate and the governor want to pass it and sign it, that will keep critical salaries and the lights on. But right now the focus is on getting this budget done. We passed a school budget in the House in June. We've passed this budget, and we've quite frankly taken a very different look at it. And instead of trying to figure out where revenues can come from, can we use the revenues that are already on the books, perhaps misused or misallocated, and apply them to the priorities of roads, schools, law enforcement, without raising taxes?
But until it's finalized, schools don't know that exact number. And I know you've told me on this show before that they have a pretty good idea, but still we look at some programs like free school lunches. In a month, or at the end of this month, those are now districts have to make hard decisions on whether they want to continue those.
Well, the bill that we passed in June is record funding for schools. It's $100 million more than what the Senate was asking for, more than what the governor was asking for. This talk around meal money, those that are truly needed, the federal money is there. The free breakfast and free lunch, that money is there. But it's given more flexibility to the school districts to determine how they want to manage it school by school.
Ranjiv, do you think when the House budget gets passed, obviously it was what Matt Hall wanted passed, what
are the odds of that actually coming to fruition? It's obviously a lot smaller than what we've seen in the past. Is that going to end up being the guts of what we get?
I hope not. I certainly hope not. And, I don't want to impugn the motives of my colleagues, and I don't think a lot of the individual House Republicans do either. There's a number of House Republicans that are scurrying around Lansing and telling everyone that this is a fake budget, that we don't actually want this budget. Because the reality is that this budget defunds the police. It cut hundreds of trooper jobs around the state. It defunds our health care. It cut billions of dollars out of critical health care programs. Health care institutions in the UP just announced last week that they're going to be closing shop. And it cuts money out of our education budget. And so contrary to what my colleague is saying, there's no federal money. There's actually billions of dollars of cuts coming because of the federal budget that was passed. And so we are literally ripping away these school meals out of the kids' hands.
But like you said, without that federal money, the budget's got to be smaller, and those cuts have to come from somewhere, correct?
Correct. So, due to the nature of these federal cuts, the budget is going to get smaller by design. And so we don't need to be compounding that with additional cuts. So this current House-passed version had $5 billion worth of cuts. And so, again, we are cutting programs like defunding the police. We're cutting money from education. We're cutting money from healthcare. And going back to just last year, the budget we passed, one of the proudest votes I took was ensuring that every kid in Michigan, regardless of what zip code they live, that they would be guaranteed a free breakfast and a free lunch. We are now forcing parents to look their kids in the eye when they're sending them on the bus, not knowing if this kid is going to have breakfast, not knowing if this kid is going to have lunch. And the federal money is not there. That's just a fact.
Well, you guys obviously are at odds there. You're saying it's there, and you're saying it's not there.
Well, first of all, the defund the police, there isn't a single state police trooper that will be removed from the streets. In fact, they're getting a 20% raise in our budget, and there's money left over to fund graduates from 2 state police trooper academies as well. So there isn't a single trooper that's going to be defunded. Again, our budget is record funding for schools. Now, if you call that a cut, you can call it a cut. There is greater flexibility on how that record funding is spent by the school districts. 886 school districts, they know better than Lansing where they need the money. And as far as the Medicaid issue, we've had work requirements through Medicaid before. They're just being applied. For those people that would be impacted by the work benefits, half of them could keep their benefits or work requirement. Half of them could keep their Medicaid benefit by getting a part-time job. If you're a caregiver for a child under 14, you're good to go. If you're medically frail, you're good to go. If you're disabled, you're good to go. So there are all sorts of adjustments there. But if you're a healthy, able-bodied adult, the expectation is that you go out and earn something in order to earn a benefit.
Go ahead.
So look, we can come on these talk shows and we can come prepared with our talking points. And so you don't need to take the Democratic stance of this.
Well prepared.
You don't need to take the Republican talking points. I think it'd be fair to look at a third party. The Hospital Association, which is a neutral third party, has come out and said that this Republican budget is going to cut 20 healthcare sector jobs from our state, 20,000 healthcare jobs. It's going to have $5 billion of economic loss and impact to our state. That is a third-party neutral assessment of this Republican House budget.
If now that we're in crunch time, I don't know if you've talked to the governor, but Matt Hall has said he doesn't want to deal with Winnie Brinks. He wants to deal with the governor. Isn't it time for the governor to get into the room with the speaker and get this done, if that's the way it's going to happen?
It's funny you ask, because the governor's been involved. I talk to the governor often. She's been involved in this process. And the fact of the matter is that the governor has passed 6 budgets on time. She knows what she's doing. The Senate Majority Leader has passed 2 budgets on time, balanced budgets on time. The only piece here is this rookie leader in our speaker who has never passed a budget. Till this day has never passed a budget on time. Now, look, I have 3 small boys at home. We were talking about it backstage. They're learning to swim. My oldest has taken swim lessons, is certified. He can jump in the deep end. He's proven to do that. The middle guy, he's taken swim lessons. He's ready to do that. The speaker is kind of like my toddler who's watched the older kids swim in the deep end and now kind of wants to jump in, maybe stayed in Holiday Inn or something, but he doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to need to be rescued. And so, just like at home when I have to rescue my toddler, I'm ready to rescue the speaker here in Lansing.
Let me get a quick answer from both of you on at least common ground. We covered education, but when it comes to roads and the size of the budget, is there common ground there? Where do you think this is? I've got less than a minute here where we can get
the
there.
House has passed a roads plan. The governor wants a roads plan, and there's a $3 billion placeholder in the Senate budget for a roads plan. So we're not exactly sure how it looks or how it will be funded over there. The Senate Finance Office has basically said that the Senate budget is unusable. It's out of balance. It can't be signed into law. Relative to the hospital concerns, there is no industry in Michigan or the United States that has grown costs faster than hospitals. Cost containment is an issue. 26% of all Americans are on Medicaid or CHIP. Something has to give.
I've got 10 seconds. Yeah. I just want to give you the final word here.
Well, again, there is a Republican roads plan out there that doesn't increase revenue, but that has to be paid from somewhere. And they've shown it in their budget. They've defunded the police, they've defunded healthcare, and they've defunded education.
Which I know we disagree on that.
Correct.
Thank you so much for coming in this morning. I appreciate it, guys. More Flashpoint next. Welcome back to Flashpoint. Earlier this week, we saw a political assassination. And if you ventured onto social media, you saw it in graphic, gruesome detail. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk's death is the latest in what is a growing trend of political and ideological attacks on politicians and activists. The question is, how did America get here? I'm not sure if we're going to be able to answer that, but we would like to try with some familiar faces. Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson, Bridge Detroit, the two who co-authored a book called The Civility Book. Also with us, a couple of Local 4 legends, Devin Skillion, former anchor and host and creator of the show you're watching right now, Flashpoint, and Guy Gordon, former Local 4 anchor here at WJR and current podcaster of Facts Matter. Guys, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you.
And the book jumped right out to me when we have a situation like this. Yeah. When you write, one of the pillars of the book, and we've talked about it on the show, is being able to have discussions that might make one person's blood boil and the other person, and yet still remain friends. And I'm sure, Stephen, you don't agree with a lot of the things Charlie Kirk stood for, but I'm sure it's disappointing to see someone killed for what they believed. I mean, at least that's what we believe.
Of course it is. I mean, this is the lowest form of discourse, violence, and it is a form of discourse that we have seen creep back into the public square in a way that's totally unacceptable in this country. We cannot solve any of our problems this way. It is irrational. It is demoralizing. It's wrong. I think that's a very separate conversation, though, from what role this person was playing in the public square before this happened. And I think it's okay to talk about both. But we got to be really clear about what happened here and the fact that it's not okay. This is not how we solve our problems in America. It needs to not be the way we solve our problems. I said last year after the election that I was worried that we were headed back to an era where political violence was a normal part of discourse, and I worried that we're there.
And I want to talk about that. Nolan, was there anything that jumps out at you from the book that you feel like is applicable to, like Stephen's mentioned, how we get out of this?
Well, yeah, who knows that? I mean, if we had the answer to that, we'd be in good shape. But, Charlie Kirk was someone, obviously he was a lightning rod and a provocateur, and but he was also someone who was willing to talk across the aisle. I mean, that's what he was doing in Utah the other day. He was having a debate in his own fashion and encouraging people to, the tent that he was shot under said, "Prove me wrong." I mean, that's an invitation to discourse. And we've got to be willing to do that. And we've got to be willing to say, we're going to listen to other views, whether we agree with them or not. Right. And this politics now has become a blood sport, and this idea that
if you don't silence the opposition, you're at risk. They're a threat to you if their views are aired. And we have to move past that on campuses and in society in general.
Yeah. Devin, I mentioned the long list, and you look at it. I'd have to write it down to be able to recite them all. You go all the way back to Gabby Giffords. Of course, we've seen it in Michigan with the governor. And by the way, as we tape this Friday morning, the lieutenant governor reporting a bomb threat, a credible bomb threat at his residence. The DNC headquarters Friday morning as well. That list, Minnesota state law commissioners, goes on and on. Is it hyperbole to say this is our new normal, like school shootings are?
Well, I think it's cyclical, and sadly, we're back into George Santayana said, "Those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it." I'd say there's very little evidence that we ever learned much from the past at all, and this feels to me very much like where we were in the '60s when we lost John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and then even George Wallace. You know, as we moved into the '70s, and the thing that none of these assassins ever get what they want. Though the ideas survive the people that lose their lives. Nothing is accomplished through all of this. I was thinking the other day about, the wisdom of Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof. Somebody says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and he says, very good, we'll all be blind and toothless. Yeah. And that's where we're headed.
Yeah. Guy, I couldn't help but wonder if you were on the radio this week, what the callers would be saying this week, and that had to probably cross your mind a little bit as...
Social media is a good indicator of that, right? I watched this unfold. I was stuck in an airport, and so I was watching it on my laptop on a normal media channel, excuse me. But I was also on my phone and watching social media. And social media was a pretty good indicator. Yeah. And it was, on the right, I saw a good friend, a media guy who's no longer in town, saying, well, to all my liberal friends, bleep you. Well, that's not who Charlie Kirk was. If you say you admire him and he inspired you, that wasn't his dogma. His idea was, let's have a debate, let's have a discussion. Let's not end the discussion by saying, to hell with you, and end the discussion with a bullet. Mm-hmm. On the other side, I saw another good friend post everything that he said was wrong with Charlie Kirk. Here are 5 of his worst statements. The subtext being, well, maybe he deserved it.
Yeah.
That's what we would be hearing right now. And that's just the kind of cage match mentality we have in our political arena right now, where we don't want to just win the argument, we want to kill the other guy.
And as the rhetoric goes up, so do these shootings. Obviously, the president doesn't do a great job of tamping down the rhetoric. We hear a lot of people say it, and he did say this has got to stop. But that was also 15 seconds after he said the Democrats were to blame for all of this.
I actually put a lot of where we are today at the feet of social media.
Yes.
Yeah.
Social media is so easy to be so much nastier and venomous to someone at your keyboard than you ever would be sitting across them from the table. The National Geographic this week had a fascinating story about how doom scrolling actually makes you sick. Mm-hmm. It actually is terrible for your health. One example of it, people who followed the Boston Marathon bombing so closely online and followed every one of those videos, the horrific videos of people losing limbs, people who really immersed themselves in it, had worse PTSD than the people who were actually there and lived through it. And that is what we are surrounding ourselves with right now, and it is creating this horrendous reaction of bile and venom everywhere you look, and it is not.
And Jason, we talk about
optimistic.
that book, Social Media, feeding this constant agitation and this constant message of hate and division. And there are a lot of forces in our society now that profit off keeping us afraid of each other. And social media.
But it's not just social media.
I'd like to always add cable news opinion shows are also, they're monetizing your hate.
But let's be clear, Charlie Kirk was profiting off of this kind of rhetoric. This was someone who was not just putting ideas out there in the public square. He was kind of making the public square a public sewer, building on stereotypes and bigotry, indulging all kinds of negative rhetoric about the other side, personal kinds of attacks on people for who they are and what they believe. This is part of the problem. Now, that has nothing to do the wrongness of what happened to him, but it is part of the discussion. This was someone who was making the discourse worse and doing it with the patina of sort of this semi-intellectual approach. But at bottom, this was a polemicist who was dragging us further apart, making us believe that the other side is the enemy.
And if we kind of cumulatively say that's how we got here, how do we get out of it?
Well,
I mean, you mentioned
how many
60s
times
and 70s.
were you told on this show, because we got 20 years of history here, need to spice it up a bit, right?
Well, in fact, when the show first began, I guess I occasionally did lean into, God, I'd like it to look like Crossfire. And then I realized that people were talking past each other instead of to each other, and I got away from that, and those kind of...
It's hard to see the argument when there's just smoke and fire.
Well, and those kind of voices were no longer welcome at this table.
And maybe it's those interactions, like you mentioned in the book, that just have to be turned down, and people have to learn to not live on social media?
I think what we have to tone down is this idea that if you don't win, the world's going to fall apart. And so it fosters this attitude that you have to win at all costs. Your political party has to win at all costs.
When I came of political age, we had people like Bob Dole and Tip O'Neill running the Senate who didn't agree with each other on much, but they never doubted the motivations of the other person. They believed that they just had a different idea about the role of government. And they would go out they would argue all day. It was like the sheepdog and the coyote, you remember from the old cartoon. They would beat the heck out of each other all day and then go home and have dinner together. And I think that is where what we're missing, because now the idea is generally, if you think differently than I do, it's because you want America to fail.
Right.
I don't know very
Or
many
you want to
people who
destroy
America to
America.
fail.
Even more than that. Here's
It's
another
worse
one.
than that, I think. It's more personal. You want me to fail. You're
To fail.
threatening me. And when I came of age, Jefferson and Adams.
Well,
Final thought,
you know what? It's a Sunday morning show. How about this? Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount. Love thy enemy. And how about we not make them an enemy in the first place? They're a neighbor we disagree with. Don't forget, let's not lose our humanity in these moments.
But how do we do that? I mean, think of how popular Charlie Kirk was. I mean, this is a huge figure in America who was using the things that we were just sitting here talking about.
Or media enterprises that make bank on fanning the
100%.
flames.
So how do we reverse that if that's what gets you ahead? If
That's the problem. Even temperedness doesn't really sell, does it?
does not.
Well,
Maybe
so
we'll try and answer that the next time we all get
tolerance,
together.
Okay.
Practice your faith.
You want to send us to break? We'll be right back.
Gosh, that would be great fun. You're watching Flashpoint on Local 4.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Wayback Machine.
That'll do it for this edition of Flashpoint. Please share your thoughts. Let's keep the discussion going. Got a mailbag coming up. Email me at flashpoint@clickondetroit.com. Have a great Sunday, everybody. We'll see you later.